This is your daily news brief, The Deep Dive, with Aisha Mehta and Karan Rao.
Today, we are unpacking a stack of sources dominated by some really powerful judicial action. We'll look at the Supreme Court throwing down the gauntlet to states over the runaway stray dog crisis.
And also mandating what feels like a social revolution, starting right in the classroom.
We also look at India's complex diplomatic dance, balancing a strategic partnership with the U.S. alongside its new leadership role in BRICS.
And finally, some critical updates on national health policy, gig economy regulation, and security crackdowns in Jammu and Kashmir. Our mission, as always, is to connect these seemingly disparate threads into a coherent, well-informed picture for you. Karan, let's jump right into the courtroom, specifically the Supreme Court, which seems, well, incredibly frustrated by the lack of administrative action across India.
It does.
We begin with a story that affects public safety in virtually every city and town: the escalating stray dog crisis.
Aisha, frustrated, is, I think, putting it mildly. The Supreme Court has delivered a scathing indictment of state governments and union territories for what it describes as a monumental administrative failure.
And this wasn't just a one-off comment, was it?
Not at all. This was during the fourth consecutive day of hearings on this critical issue, before a bench including Justices Vikram Nath, Sandeep Mehta, and N.V.N. Jaria.
The phrase that jumped out from the sources for me was the court's observation that the problem has multiplied 1,000 times.
Exactly.
That isn't just a casual figure of speech, is it? It speaks to years, perhaps decades, of systemic inaction.
It absolutely does. And because of that, the court is now prepared to introduce, a radical new mechanism of accountability.
A new mechanism, what does that involve?
The bench explicitly threatened to impose heavy monetary compensation.
Compensation from whom?
Directly on governments for every single dog bite incident. This is a massive legal move. It shifts the liability away from the individual victim and places it squarely on the negligent administrator.
So what does this actually change on the ground? I mean, it's one thing for the court to issue a fine, but what is the strategic effect of holding the government financially liable?
The strategic effect is to force the issue up the chain of administrative priority. It's simple, really. When state finances, their actual budgets, are directly threatened by payouts for dog bites, suddenly, managing stray populations becomes a top-tier administrative mandate, not an afterthought.
And they're focusing on the most vulnerable victims, I believe.
Yes, specifically children and the elderly who suffer disproportionately severe injuries. The goal is to compel governments to treat public safety in this context with the urgency that budget cuts or massive liability payouts would demand.
Okay, so let's unpack the core debate here, because it creates a clear tension between public safety advocates and animal rights groups. The bench asked a very fundamental, almost provocative question.
A very provocative one.
Why should dogs be permitted to roam, bite, and frighten people?
And following that question, they offered a very specific, and I'd say quite controversial, suggestion aimed at individual accountability.
This is about the people who feed the dogs, isn't it?
Exactly. The justices proposed that individuals who habitually feed strays should obtain proper licenses and then adopt the animals they care for. It's an attempt to formalize that responsibility.
But the animal rights advocates have a very strong counter-argument. They say the real failure lies in the official system.
That is their central point. Senior advocates representing animal welfare organizations stress that culling is both inhumane and, critically, scientifically ineffective as a long-term solution.
And they're championing the Animal Birth Control, or ABC, program.
Yes, as the only scientific and effective management tool. And the statistic they brought forward to support this is just, it's shocking. Government data shows only 77 ABC centers are currently operating nationwide.
77. In a country of this size, grappling with a problem that has, as the court said, multiplied 1,000 times, that number really underscores the systemic failure.
It does. They argue the crisis isn't due to the concept of ABC, but the utter failure of state authorities to fund, staff, and diligently execute the program.
Right. Meanwhile, the lawyers representing victims are pushing back hard. They defended the court's existing November 7 order.
They did. They're looking for maximum restriction and maximum exposure areas, pushing for the extension of regulation to public hubs like airports, railway stations, major parks.
And the discussion broadened beyond just human safety, didn't it?
It did, into ecological disaster. a specific petition was introduced detailing the crisis in Ladakh.
Ladakh.
Yes, where an estimated 55,000 feral dogs are now threatening critically endangered wildlife species. This shows the problem has morphed from a municipal issue into a complex public health, social, and environmental catastrophe.
You mentioned the complexity of the debate over residents' associations. How does a court navigate the rights of a community that wants dogs present versus an individual who feels unsafe?
That is the tightrope they have to walk. The court seems to be leaning toward the individual's right to be free from fear and physical threat in public spaces.
But there's a counter-argument, isn't there? That removing sterilized dogs from their territories might actually make things worse.
That's a sophisticated argument, yes.
Oh.
It posits that if you relocate a calm, vaccinated, and sterilized dog, the vacuum created will be quickly filled by a new, likely more aggressive, non-sterilized animal.
This complicates things further.
It does. Nonetheless, the court reiterated its existing directives for the November 7 order, aiming for immediate control.
And what are those non-negotiable directives?
Twofold. First, sterilized and vaccinated dogs must be moved to designated shelters, not just released back onto the streets. Second, and this is a huge win for road safety, the order mandates the removal of all stray animals, including cattle, from national and state highways.
So the hearings resume on January 20th. What is the final framework the court is aiming for here?
The framework aims for comprehensive accountability. It's trying to create a long-term, humane, and crucially enforceable system. It's moving beyond blame to establish clear responsibility for both state authorities and individuals.
A fascinating test of how far the judiciary is willing to go.
Absolutely. We now shift our focus to diplomacy and how India is managing its strategic bilateral ties with the U.S. while simultaneously leading a major multilateral forum.
Okay, so let's unpack this high-level exchange between External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The conversation was described as positive and forward-looking.
And the timing is highly deliberate, Aisha. It came just one day after the arrival of the new U.S. ambassador, Sergio Gore.
Who immediately committed to strengthening the economic relationship.
Precisely. This meeting operationalized that commitment straight away. And the sheer breadth of topics indicates a deep institutionalized partnership.
We saw 5 major areas highlighted. Beyond trade and defense, what stood out as strategically vital?
For me, it's the push on cooperation on critical minerals. This is the cornerstone of future global economic security.
We're not just talking about any materials here.
No, we're talking about minerals essential for emerging technologies. Semiconductors, high-capacity batteries, solar panels, advanced defense systems. For Washington, securing a supply chain that bypasses dependence on adversarial states is paramount.
And India is a crucial potential partner in that effort.
Absolutely. So the goal is accelerating progress on a bilateral trade deal, but through this lens of strategic necessity. It's about de-risking global commerce.
Now, here is where India's foreign policy gets truly interesting. Minister Jaishankar shifts gears almost immediately to discuss India's multilateral priorities, specifically its BRICS presidency.
He is a textbook example of what we call multi-alignment. Jaishankar used this moment to unveil the official BRICS logo and articulate India's planned approach. The key phrase was a humanity-first, people-centric focus. This means India is framing its leadership around shared global challenges, geopolitical uncertainties, economic turbulence, and collective climate issues.
So this serves a dual purpose, doesn't it? Maintaining a strong tie with the U.S. while asserting leadership among emerging economies.
Exactly. The significance is twofold. First, it shows India's relationship with the U.S. is not exclusive. Second, by emphasizing a humanity-first approach within BRICS, India positions itself as a constructive leader, steering the narrative away from potential anti-Western rhetoric.
It's a tightrope walk that maximizes India's geopolitical leverage.
Precisely. It's about retaining strategic autonomy. India is showing it can simultaneously strengthen defense ties with Washington and steer a major economic bloc.
Let's turn back to domestic affairs now, where the Supreme Court continues its proactive role in driving social change. We have 2 profound updates from the legal and policy fronts.
And this first judgment, authored by Justice P.S. Narasimha, is truly foundational. The court declared that achieving equality in Indian society must start in the classroom.
They were detailing the intended design of the Right to Education, or RTE, Act.
That's right. And the court's description of the RTE's design is almost radical. Justice Narasimha envisioned a shared space where, and I'm quoting from the source, The child of a multimillionaire or a Supreme Court judge sits on the same bench as the child of an auto-rickshaw driver or street vendor.
It's a direct attack on ingrained hierarchy and segregation.
It is. It aims to use compulsory education as the ultimate crucible for social change. By forcing these divergent backgrounds into a common environment, the purpose is to normalize equality and break down entrenched barriers.
But this idealistic vision runs headlong into the reality of implementation failure, which is what the originating case was all about.
The case of Dinesh Biwaji Ashtekar perfectly illustrates this gap. In 2016, his children were denied free elementary education.
And seats were actually available, weren't they?
That's the tragic detail. RTI data later confirmed that seats designated for weaker sections were in fact available. This shows the deep resistance to fully implementing the constitutional mandate of Article 21A.
So the court is now putting pressure on governments to stop treating this as optional compliance.
Exactly. They must treat admissions from these disadvantaged sections not as a burden, but as a national mission. This term elevates the requirement beyond statutory obligation to a moral and strategic imperative.
And the court extended this mandate for proactive action directly to the judiciary itself.
This is where the judgment becomes truly transformative. The court instructed both constitutional and civil courts to walk the extra mile, to provide swift and effective relief to parents who are denied this foundational right.
So the ultimate takeaway is that inclusive schooling is being reframed not merely as a legal requirement, but as a mandatory social intervention.
It's the court declaring that true democracy requires shared common experience, starting from childhood. A profound ruling.
It really is. Now let's pivot from education to healthcare and an urgent policy change affecting medical postgraduate admissions.
This decision by the center to drastically lower the NEET PG 2025 qualifying percentile is driven by pure necessity. The goal is to fill over 9,000 vacant postgraduate medical seats.
9,000, that's a huge number.
It is, and these vacancies severely weaken medical colleges and place unbearable pressure on our healthcare system.
The numbers are startling, particularly the reduction for reserved categories. Can you break that down for us?
It's a dramatic shift. For general and EWS candidates, the percentile dropped from 50th to 7th. For general PWBD, from 45th to 5th. But the most crucial detail is for SC, ST, and OBC candidates.
Yes.
Their percentile was reduced from the 40th percentile all the way down to 0.
0. And because NEET PG uses negative marking, that doesn't just mean a score of 0, does it?
No, it means an exceptionally low, potentially negative score, because wrong answers subtract marks. A 0 percentile effectively translates to a qualifying cutoff score of -40 out of a maximum of 800.
-40. That's unprecedented.
Completely. And it signals the urgency of this vacancy crisis.
Critics would immediately point to the concept of merit. If the cutoff is effectively 0, doesn't that render the exam meaningless?
That is the core conflict. The National Board of Examinations in Medical Sciences offered a strategic justification. They argue that NEET PG is intended primarily to create a merit list for allocation, not to retest the competence of candidates who have already cleared their MBBS degree.
And what are the consequences of leaving those 9,000 seats vacant?
The consequences are dire. It weakens teaching hospitals, disrupts specialized training, and, most critically, leads to the severe overburdening of existing resident doctors.
Who are the backbone of government hospitals?
Absolutely. When they are strained, patient care suffers immediately. And this wasn't an isolated government decision. The Indian Medical Association made a formal representation urging this revision.
So, just to be crystal clear for our listeners, does a candidate who scores an over 40 automatically get a seat?
Absolutely not. This is a crucial point. This change only affects eligibility for counseling. It expands the pool of doctors who can participate in the seat allocation process. They must still compete for seats based on their actual merit rank.
It's an administrative fix to a systemic utilization problem.
Precisely. We shift now from social reforms to political organization and state security, with updates from the BJP and the J&K administration.
Right. The Bharatiya Janata Party is showcasing organizational unity this week with the formal election of Nitin Nabin as the new party president.
This is less an election and more a carefully choreographed display of political succession. The preparations themselves are designed to project strength. All key leadership figures are converging on Delhi for the two-day process.
And the nomination process seems incredibly structured to erase any doubt about consensus. 3 distinct sets of nomination papers.
That three-tiered approach is highly strategic. The first set, signed by over 20 state presidents, guarantees regional endorsement. The second set involves the highest tier of power, Prime Minister Modi, Rajnath Singh, Amit Shah, and JP Nadda.
Which signals unequivocal approval from the top.
And the third set, from the BJP National Council, ensures support from the organizational grassroots. It's a complete formalization of his leadership.
And the significance of this move right now.
It signals continuity, stability, and consolidation. By ensuring a highly visible consensual transition now, the BJP projects an image of organizational discipline and readiness for future political challenges.
A clear message sent through organizational architecture. Now, moving to a critical issue of state security in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, the administration has taken drastic measures. Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha terminated the services of 5 government employees on January 13th.
And this action invokes one of the most powerful and I'd say controversial constitutional provisions available.
That is Article 311(2)(c). It's the administrative nuclear option. It permits dismissal of a government employee without a formal inquiry in the interest of state security.
It removes the right to due process.
In these specific circumstances, yes. And this is part of a sustained campaign that's been running since 2020. Since then, approximately 85 employees have been sacked under these special provisions.
Let's delve into the specific allegations against these 5 individuals because the sources provide some very detailed examples.
These dossiers illustrate the strategic threat. We start with Mohammed Ishfaq, a teacher. The allegation is that he was actively working for Lashkar-e-Toiba, maintaining contact with its commander and using his position to radicalize youth.
A direct compromise of the education system. The next 2 cases seem to involve an escape dating back almost 2 decades.
It shows the enduring nature of these sleeper cells. Tariq Ahmad Shah, a lab technician, and Farooq Ahmad Pat, a Forest Department worker, both allegedly assisted in the escape of an HM terrorist named Amin Baba back in 2005.
And Pat used his government ID to bypass checkpoints.
Yes, illustrating how official credentials can be weaponized. What's alarming is that Pat's alleged activities continued even after a recent arrest and bail.
And the final 2 cases involve direct logistical and financial support for active terrorism.
Precisely. Bashir Ahmad Mir, a lineman, was identified as an active Liti overground worker, providing shelter, food, and security information. And Mohammed Yusuf, a driver, was caught transporting funds and arms for Hizbul Mujahideen. Police intercepted his vehicle and found a pistol, a grenade, and 5 lakh in cash.
The specificity of these allegations is quite striking.
It is. The takeaway here is that the J&K administration is prioritizing what it sees as dismantling internal terror infrastructure over a traditional due process, deeming the threat existential.
We transition now to a growing area of regulatory focus, the quick commerce gig economy, and a vital public health alert.
This is a major signpost in the regulatory journey of quick commerce. Blinkit has officially abandoned its iconic 10-minute delivery branding.
And this wasn't a voluntary corporate decision.
Not at all. It followed a direct directive from the government to all such companies to stop advertising specific delivery timelines. This intervention was the direct result of pressure from the workers themselves.
The late December strike by gig worker groups.
That strike was pivotal. They argued compellingly that these aggressive timelines create intense, dangerous pressure on riders, forcing them to violate traffic norms and contributing directly to road accidents.
So Blinkit switched its tagline.
From 10,000-plus products delivered in 10 minutes to the safer 30,000-plus products delivered at your doorstep.
But the workers themselves pointed out a deeper structural issue here, didn't they?
They did. They highlighted the glaring absence of a formal negotiation mechanism. They had to resort to a strike just to air fundamental safety concerns. They are now stressing the need for a permanent institutional framework.
And there was a contradiction in the company's defense.
A fascinating one. The Blinkit CEO maintained the timer wasn't visible to riders on the app, arguing this mitigated the pressure.
But the workers countered that.
Sharply. They pointed out the 10 minutes promise printed on uniforms and the customer-facing countdown timers. These elements create an intense, constant sense of urgency that dictates their behavior on the road.
So the core insight is that the government is choosing to regulate marketing practices based on the danger they impose on workers and the public.
It's a critical precedent. It shifts the burden of safety back onto the platform, a necessary step toward better labor practices.
Definitely. Now, shifting focus to public health preparedness.
This is a highly critical alert from Jharkhand, triggered by suspected Nipah virus cases in neighboring West Bengal. This is a situation demanding immediate and coordinated vigilance.
And what are the immediate concerns, given the severity of Nipah?
Nipah is a notifiable disease due to its extremely high mortality rate and its capacity for rapid human-to-human transmission. The reports concern two suspected cases in two nurses at a hospital in North 24 Parganas, which is why the proximity triggered the high alert.
And the response from authorities?
It was swift. Jharkhand's health minister directed all districts to implement strict monitoring and activate rapid response teams. Simultaneously, Union Health Minister J.P. Nadda assured West Bengal of full central support.
What specific preparedness measures are being prioritized?
The guidelines focus on early detection and prevention. There's a major push for community-level awareness campaigns, and for health workers, strict protocols for identifying symptoms, isolation, and safe patient referral are paramount.
The lack of a specific antiviral treatment makes containment crucial, doesn't it?
Absolutely vital. The priority is clear: early detection, swift isolation, and robust public communication to manage risk without causing panic.
We move now to the high-octane world of professional sports and critical workforce adjustments in India's technology sector.
Let's start with cricket. The Women's Premier League saw an absolute masterclass from Mumbai Indians, securing a 7-wicket victory over Gujarat Giants.
Chasing down a formidable total.
A fantastic performance. Chasing 193 is a massive ask, and this is now the second highest target ever successfully overhauled in WPL history. For Mumbai, the narrative is clear. They extended their flawless 8-cell record against the Giants.
And they've never lost when Harmanpreet Kaur scores a 50.
That's the key statistic. She is the psychological core of that chase unit.
Before the chase, the Gujarat Giants put up 192 for 5. Tell us about the most tactically intriguing part of their innings.
The tactical nugget came late. Ayushi Soni became the first player in WPL history to be retired out.
A bold, aggressive move.
Very. She voluntarily left the field to allow a more aggressive hitter to come in. It shows how high the tactical game has risen in the WPL.
But that pressure didn't faze Harmanpreet. How did the momentum shift so decisively in Mumbai's favor?
Her partnership with Nicola Carey was the turning point. With 84 runs still needed off 48 balls, the Giants were favorites. Then Carey smashed 5 boundaries in a single over.
That one over changed everything.
It dramatically reduced the required rate and took the pressure off Harmanpreet, who was sublime. The Giants' fielding let them down. She capitalized on dropped catches and sealed the win clinically.
A great performance. Now, shifting sharply to the corporate sector and Tata Consultancy Services.
Yes, TCS has confirmed that job cuts related to its organizational overhaul will continue into 2026. This has heightened anxiety across the entire IT workforce.
Let's talk about the scale, because the reduction is substantial.
It's significant. The workforce shrank by roughly 30,000 employees over 6 months, pushing their total headcount below the 6 lakh mark. In the most recent quarter alone, the net reduction was over 11,000.
And that's a combination of targeted terminations and not refilling vacancies?
Exactly. TCS insists this is process-driven restructuring, not number-driven layoffs. But when you see a sustained reduction of 30,000 people, the internal mood must be tense.
And it's happening alongside stricter work-from-office rules.
Yes. Reports detail that employees who failed to comply with mandatory attendance norms faced delayed or even withheld appraisals. Performance is now explicitly linked to adherence to these office mandates.
So, what's the industry view on this? Is this just cost-cutting or something more?
Well, while TCS links it to performance, industry speculation inevitably connects this large-scale recalibration to the rising adoption of AI tools. Whether it's pure cost-cutting or preparing for automation, it reflects a deliberate move to realign the workforce for future needs.
Finally today, we cross into international news with the significant and, frankly, disturbing acknowledgement from Iranian officials.
This disclosure marks a monumental shift in Iran's official narrative. An official provided Reuters with the first public acknowledgement of the scale of casualties, stating that approximately 2,000 people, including protesters and security personnel, have been killed during 2 weeks of nationwide unrest.
2,000. Why the sudden acknowledgement of such a high death toll?
The acknowledgement itself is highly significant because it confirms the sheer intensity of the government's crackdown. Before this, the figures were highly speculative due to an internet blackout.
And the unrest itself was rooted in economic distress.
Primarily, yes. It represents the most significant internal challenge to Iran's leadership in at least 3 years, compounded by heightened international pressure.
So how is the government attempting to control the narrative now?
They're employing a dual strategy. They acknowledge economic grievances are legitimate, but they insist the unrest has been hijacked and orchestrated by external actors, specifically the U.S. and Israel.
So they're blaming terrorists?
Yes. This narrative shifts focus from domestic failures and frames the high fatality count as a result of fighting hostile, foreign-backed elements.
But verified videos have shown intense clashes.
They have. Intense nighttime clashes, gunfire, burning vehicles. This evidence starkly contrasts with the government's attempts to minimize the role of domestic dissent and state repression.
The acknowledgement of 2,000 fatalities, even framed this way, points to a leadership feeling highly vulnerable.
It absolutely does. It marks a clear shift in official messaging, perhaps an attempt to preempt even more damning independent reports, while simultaneously framing the violence as an unavoidable consequence of fighting sophisticated hostile actors.
That concludes our deep dive into the critical headlines shaping the world today. We covered a phenomenal range of topics, from the Supreme Court forcing the hands of administrative bodies to the intense security operations in Jammu and Kashmir.
We also detailed India's sophisticated diplomatic multi-alignment strategy partnering with the U.S. while leading BRICS and the ongoing regulatory battle to protect gig economy workers.
The major theme that emerges across domestic affairs today is one of administrative accountability, whether it's the Supreme Court demanding proactive implementation of laws or the government stepping in on rider safety. The judiciary and central authorities are trying to enforce institutional change where local administration has failed.
This push for enforceable accountability, whether it's financial, legal, or regulatory, is the essential takeaway from today's sources. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material.
We invite you to join us next time as we continue to explore the most important stories shaping the world around us. What will the true long-term impact be of reducing the barrier for entry into critical medical education? That's a question we'll continue to mull over.
Join us next time.